Thanks very much for your time this Friday morning, Hendrik. I'm just looking at the article that you've published on this point, and one thing that you say here has really struck a chord with me. You say we're still coming to terms with the progression policy, which, as we know, is aimed at pushing learners to the next grade, even when they are not ready. What do you know about this new plan now to make grade 9 an exit point?
Well, as far as I know, the minister is trying once again to reduce the dropout rates in the system by formalizing grade 9 dropouts, by giving them certificates so that at least they can leave the system with certificates. But we think that, this is a move that is going to drastically reduce the standard of education, as we have already said, because already there's a lot of vibe. Most of the learners think that once you have reached grade 9, you have achieved your best, and then you can exit the system. And they don't know, little do they know that universities will never ever recognize a grade 9 qualification, and employers in the same note will never recognize a grade 9 qualification, no matter how many times the minister can talk about it. So in a sense, we are now entering a new era, an era where we are creating, criminals in society, because these learners will just be mushrooming, roaming around in communities without anything proper to do. Of course, there will be that few, fewer learners may want to proceed into the technical colleges once they have their grade 9 certificates. But the majority of learners as it stands believe that there is no more use to go to grade 12, which is not the case, because grade 12 is still very much important if you have to go into tertiary institutions, but also when you want to go into technical, TVET colleges as such.
I mean, Hendrik, from what you're saying, it sounds like the minister is trying to boost her own numbers to make sure that she can boast, as her department, that there are lower dropout rates.
Exactly. We are aware that there are learners who are struggling, who drop out from time to time from schools. So what the minister is actually trying to do is to make sure that that number is drastically reduced. But in our view, or in my view, is that even though a learner can get, a grade 9 a certificate, which will be formalized, there will still be dropouts anyway, because that certificate is not going to help them, to access institutions of higher learning or to make a meaningful contribution in the mainstream economy of our country. And it is for this reason that we have said it before that, government must find a way to ensure that they look at, primary schooling. That is where they need to zoom in to make sure that learners who are unable to read for meaning as it stands in grade 4 to grade 6 need to be attended to. Because once they reach high school, it is too late. We have said it before that it is of no use for government to allow learners in the foundation phase to just cruise through without any proper learning and teaching. And, we are really facing a crisis as a country, and it is about time that something drastic is done to make sure that, we revive our education system. If you look at...
Hendrik, activists like yourself have been preaching this for years now. Let's focus on early childhood education. Let's make sure that when our children go into grade 4, they are reading well, they are reading for meaning. Have you seen any changes in this regard over the past few years?
Well, we have not seen any changes up to now, and that is a cause for great concern, because if you look also our ministers as well as, our leaders in government, particularly in the Department of Education, they don't really, in our view, they don't care much about the system itself, because their children are already studying in private schools. The minister cannot risk with her own children and put them in the public education system, because they know very well that, there's not much happening. So I think that we are paying a lot of lip service through summits, through conferences that are held, we are really paying a lot of lip service to education, and there is no genuine commitment. And as far as the public education system is concerned, that is worse. The current move will actually lead to more ill-discipline amongst learners as well, because they know that they can just exit the system at grade 9. Well, so even those who are already in grade 10.
Hendrik, let's just take a moment for a second and hear what the minister had to say as both of us tried to come to grips with exactly what the plan is here. Let's listen to Minister Angie Motshekga.
By the time we go to grade 10, 11, 12, we start beginning to observe quite high dropout rates. And one of our findings in research and also household survey says it's then when they go to higher grades, they can't cope with the curriculum, so which means they're bringing deficits with them from lower grades. So they find it, and that's why we don't even have 100 or 100% pass. We struggle when we get to the FET phase. So it means there are deficits that they've been carrying through the system, and hence others drop out with bigger numbers. But the other, so that even children with special needs, there's not enough remedial education. They begin to be teenagers, so you can see the effects of teenage and poor or weaker parenting. So you see all the challenges, social and academic problems that they were dragging with them that begins to. So that's why I'm saying there's lots of things that we have to do in that phase where we still have them. And worse still is that for years we've been having what we call academic curriculum. And it's not every child who really wants to go into history and matric grade, higher grades. They begin to discover themselves, their talents are showing up. And as a system or as a country, we've not been able to give them other pathways which enable them to get other forms of education other than academic. And that's what we're trying to address in the lower grades.
So, Hendrik, I hope you could hear clearly there for what the minister had to say. So basically, what she's saying is that learners are bringing deficits from the lower grades and they're dragging that with them into the higher grades, and they're struggling to cope. But that goes back to what you and I have been talking about, address those issues in early childhood education already.
Yes, indeed. But it is not only issues of academics that need to be addressed. We know that most of the dropouts in the schooling system are mainly black learners or black children, some of whom come from impoverished backgrounds, who are unable to cope with the demand of education. Some of them come from child-headed families, as the minister has already said. But I think in this way, government needs to come up with an integrated approach to make sure that they fight poverty, they fight unemployment and inequality in society. Because for as long as poverty, inequality and unemployment continue to persist, we will never be able to get the education system right. And the other issue, of course, is crime, issues of gangsters in communities. So these are issues that need government commitment as a whole, not just the Department of Education. And the other thing, of course, we know, we are aware that the budget of the Education Department is also too low. I mean, there are still learners who come from communities where they still use pit latrines, and learners in such schools are always demotivated to carry on with their learning and teaching. So we are saying that it is high time that, President Ramaphosa calls a summit, which will look at all the broader issues that affect education, be it safety, be it poverty, be it dropout rates. We cannot really celebrate the introduction of grade 9 certificate as a measure to cut dropout rates. We really need to find a way of keeping learners in our schools. It is in the best interest of society for grade 9 learners to remain at school until they finish their grade 12. Because we are talking here about learners who are 14 years old. Some of them are 13, 15. They are still young. You can't just send them into the mainstream society and say that go and stand on your own. It will create a lot of problems. Our prisons are still going to be full because, as I said earlier, learners will have nothing to do. They'll just be roaming around in the streets and be exposed to drugs and so on and so forth. It's going to be a challenge for the country.
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much for your time, as always. Hendrik Makaneta is an education activist joining us there from our studios in Pretoria.